to my channel, Escape to Storyland. Today, I'm back again with another love story. This story is called The Advocate by Alice Brown. But before I start, do subscribe to my channel, do hit the like button and the bell icon for further notifications. So let's go. You going? Called Elizabeth Wilde from the road to Ardelia, sitting unhappily on the front steps. It was 7 o'clock of a wonderful August morning, with all the bloom of summer and the colour of fall. Isabella was a dark, strong young lady who walked with her head in the air, and Ardelia was pretty, frail, and perfect in her own small way. She looked like a child in comparison. Isabel had been down to carry a frosted cake to her little niece, Ellen, for Ellen's share of the picnic at Cooley's Woods. It was Fairfax Day, when once a year all Fairfax went to the spot where the first settlers drank from the boiling spring on their way to a clearing. You going? She called again with a commanding tone, and Ardelia answered as if from some unwillingness. I guess so. Now what do you say that for? Shouted her mother from an upper window where, trusting to her distance from the road, she thought she could speak her mind without Isabel's hearing. You know you aren't. Oliver's gone off to work in the acre lot. Isabel had heard. She stood up and looked at Ardelia thoughtfully, her black brows drawn together, and she bit down on her full lips. Ardelia, she called softly, after that moment of consideration. What is it? Came Ardelia's unwilling voice, the tone of one who has some emotions to hide. Come here a minute. Ardelia rose slowly and came down the path. She was a sharp lady, perfectly fashioned and very appealing in her bold prettiness. Isabel eyed her sharply and judged from the certain signs that she had at least meant to go. She had on a light blue dress with the Hamburg frills, and her sorrowful face indicated that she had worn it, but there was no use of it. What time you going, Delia? Asked Isabel quietly over the fence. Ardelia could not look at her. She stood with a bent head, busily arranging a bunch of dry leaves that fell out over the path, and Isabel was sure that her eyes were wet. I don't know, she said vaguely. Maybe not very early. Isabel was looking at her tenderly. It was not a personal tenderness so much as a softness born out of a peculiar circumstance. She knew exactly why she was sorry for Ardelia, in a way no one else could be. Yet there seemed to be no actual means of helping her. Well, she said, turning away, maybe I'll see you there. Say, Delia. A sudden thought was brightening her eyes to even a kinder glow. If you haven't planned any other way, I suppose you come along with us. Jim Bryant is going to take me, and he would love to have you join us. What say, Delia? Ardelia's delicate figure straightened, and now she looked at Isabel. There was something new in her gentle glance. It looked like dignity. I'm much obliged to you, Isabel, she returned stiffly. If I go, I have arranged to go another way. All right, said Isabel. Well, I guess I'll be getting along. But before she was halfway to the turning of the road, she heard Mrs. Drake's shrill voice from the upper window. He's begun to dig, Delia. Oliver's begun to dig. He won't stop for no picnics. I can tell you that. It seemed to Isabel as if the world were very much out of tune for delicate girls like Delia, who wanted pleasure and could not have it. She paused a moment at the crossing of the road, the frown of consideration again upon her brow. Makes me mad, she said to herself, but half absently, as if that were not the issue at all. Then she turned her back on her own home road and the house where her starched dress was waiting her, and where Jim Bryant would presently call to take her to Police Woods, and walked briskly down the other way. Isabel stopped at the acre field, but she had no idea of what she meant to say when she was there. Oliver was digging potatoes, as she knew he would be, and she recognized the bend of the back, the steady stress of one who would work too long without any rest, so that his very pose spoke like a lifelong purpose. She stood still for a moment or two before he saw her, looking at him. Old feeling awoke in her, along with old angers. She remembered how he had made her suffer in the stubborn course of his own will, and how free she had felt when at last she had broken their engagement and seen him fall under Ardelia's charm. But he would always mean something to her, more than any other man. She had suffered too much pain and sorrow for him. She had protected him too long against the faults of his own nature, and now she could not be happy unless for his sake she protected Ardelia a little also. Suddenly, he lifted himself to rest his back and saw her. They stood confronting each other, each with a sense of familiarity and pain. Oliver was a handsome fellow, tall, well-built, muscular, with a rich and warm light complexion. He looked kindly, but seemed indifferent in his own way. "That you, Isabel?" he asked awkwardly. They had met only for a passing word since the breaking of their relationship. "Yes," she said briefly. "I've got to speak to you. Wait a minute. I'll come in by the bars. And you, meet me under the old cherry tree. It will be shady there." She turned her back to the bars, ducked carefully under, and holding her skirts from the rough land, made her way to the cherry tree in the corner of the lot. Oliver wonderingly followed. She felt again that particular anger she reserved for him when she saw him stalking along, the plough in his hand. She looked around the surrounding and felt a strong and warm gust of wind on her face as she was making her way to the cherry tree. There was a sudden flood of memories of the relationship that took the best of her, which made her pause for a minute to collect herself. She reached and was waiting for him under the tree. "Oliver," she began to speak, out of an impulse hardly yet approved by judgment. "Are you going to the picnic?" Oliver looked at her in wonder. He thought about her and his pain, but did not have any expression on his face. "Why, no," he said slowly. "Didn't you promise Delia you would go?" "No, I guess not. I said maybe I would be around if I had time, but I have not found that time. These potatoes have got to be dug. The color of angry red had overflowed into Isabel's full cheeks. She looked like a strong-headed, well-spoken and opinionated fault-finding advocate. Oliver, she said impulsively, Delia is sitting on the front steps of her house waiting for you to come. She'll be terribly disappointed if you put her aside like this. Oliver took off his hat and passed a hand over his forehead. She noticed, as she had 100 times before, how fine his hair was at the roots, and was angry again because he would not, with his exasperating ways, let any woman love him as she might. He seemed to have nothing to say, but she knew the picture of the lonely and sad Delia sitting on the steps was far from moving him. It did cause him an honest trouble, for he was kind, but it was not that important for him, for which he would postpone his work. Oliver, she continued, did you ever know what it was that made me tell you we must break off being engaged? He was looking at her earnestly. His own mind seemed returning to a past ache and loss. I understood, he said at a length. I understood it was because you kind of figured it out that we would not get along well. She stood there, a frowning figure, her lips compressed, her eyes stormy. Then she turned to him with all frankness and honesty. Oliver, she said, I never gave you any reasons. What's the use? I was terribly fond of you. I was. I don't know if there is any girl who would say that when you are engaged to somebody else and I am engaged myself, and I am very happy as the day is long. But what actually happened between us was that you never made me feel or have a good time. He stood leaning upon his plough, very handsome, very stern in his attention to her, and, as she could see, entirely surprised that the child inside her, that rare, unguarded part that she kept in hiding, came out and spoke. Why, Oliver, we never had any fun. You were awfully good to me. You would worry yourself to pieces if I was sick. But we never had more than one or two good times together. Those times did not last that long, and it was always me who had planned for those special times, not you. I got terribly tired of it, and I said to myself, if it is like this now, when we are only going out together, it will be a million times worse when we are married. And then, when you took a fancy to Delia, I was really pleased, and to be honest, somewhat relieved. I said to myself, maybe she'll know how to manage you. Maybe it was something in me, something that lacked in me, I thought, that made him not want to have a good time with me. And maybe now it won't be so. And when I see you going about the same old way, working from morning till night, I said to myself, something's got to be done. I am not going to have Delia put up with you like I had to. It's not because it's Delia. I am not so terribly fond of her. Only we went to school together. But don't you see, Oliver? I couldn't see it for myself. No girl could. But I can for Delia. Forget about what happened between us. Does Delia deserve this? She needs your attention, and you're depriving her from it, like you did for me when we were together. Well, said Oliver. Well, he was entirely amazed. Then, as he looked at the field, a general proverb occurred to him, and he remarked, "The farm's got to be carried on." "No, it does not either," said Isabel with a passionate earnestness. "Not as you do it. Other folks don't work themselves to death the way you do, and you're cautious too. It's because you like it. You like it better than anything else in this world. Work is everything for you, and nothing else matters to you. No emotion, no nothing. You were born so, and it is just as bad as being born with an appetite for drinking or anything else." "I never knew you felt so, Isabel," he said gravely. "I don't see why you didn't speak about this before when we were together. Maybe I would have had changed your mind and we would have been—" "I'd rather have died," she declared passionately. "Any girl would. Delia would. Maybe she'll cry all the afternoon if she finds she is not going. But if you go over there Saturday night, butter won't melt in her mouth. She won't tell you how ashamed she is before her friends to think that you didn't take the trouble to go with her. Anyways, she won't if she's any kind of girl." Oliver had plucked a handful of grass from the edge of the tuft under the tree, and he was wiping his plough thoughtfully. Isabel began to laugh. She was trembling all over from old angers and the excitement of a new daring. She kept laughing. "One thing," she said, and she brushed away the tears with an impatient hand. "Delia's mother has got her spyglass on us this very minute. What under the sun she thinks I'm here for, I don't know. And I don't care about her anyway. You can tell her anything you want to, only you come. Come now, Oliver, you come." Oliver quite meekly hung up his plough in the branches and waited for her to lead the way. "I've got to go and get the carriage ready," he said. "Mother took Dolly to go after Aunt Huldy. Mother has always made a good deal about the picnic." There was a sound of horse hoofs upon the road, and Isabel, her present mission stricken from her mind, turned to see it was Jim Bryant, driving by to call her. "My soul," she said under her breath. "What is it, Isabel?" Oliver was asking her with concern. She had caught herself up, and as she laughed, she suddenly felt a joy of happiness inside her. "Nothing. You go ahead. Get the carriage." They walked out of the field in silence. At the stone wall, he paused. "Isabel," he said, and with that double sense she had had all through the interview, she thought this was the look she had seen on his grandfather's face when he held the prayer. "Isabel, you should have had spoken to me before. Why, I've been trying to get ahead so as to make her comfortable when we set up the new house after we get married, and she gets used to the housekeeping." Isabel was not sure whether he meant her or Ardelia. At any rate, it was the woman to whom he was determined to be loyally kind. She also paused and looked at him with earnest eyes. It was the last moment in all her life to convince and alter him. "Don't you see, Oliver," she urged, that is what couples are together for, chiefly to have a good time. I don't mean they've got to have a good time from morning till night. They've got to work hard too. Why, what's Delia marrying you for? She's not marrying you to stay at home and work day in and day out. She can do that now. right where she is. She is not doing that so she can see you working all the time. She can take her mother's spyglass and have that too, till she's sick to death of it. You go along, Oliver, and finish up that precious work of yours. Maybe that is what actually suits you best. He looked at her very kindly, gratefully too perhaps, and turned away to the live oak field. But Isabel, hurrying homewards, stopped and called him. Oliver, you say your mother's gone? Yes. She lay your things out? No, I guess not. I told her I wasn't going. Well, I'll see to it as I run along. Laying out the things of the men folks of the family was rigidly observed in this household, where Oliver was regarded as the cherished head. He had been brought up to a helpless lack of knowledge with his best clothes. He knew them only as a medium to make him look sharp when he got them on, and to prevent his mother from a tendency to make unwelcome remarks about his personal charms. Isabel laughed a little to herself in a regretful fashion as she hurried along the road. Her own sweetheart was waiting for her, but not for that would she reject the quest. She ran up to Oliver's driveway and without pausing opened the blind where the key she knew was hidden and snatched it out from there. She unlocked the door and crossed the kitchen, tidy in its order, with Oliver's cold luncheon set out on the table under wire covers. She made her way upstairs and in his room, which was also tidy and very airy. She stood there for a moment looking about her. Isabel gave a little laugh. I think I am going crazy, she said to herself. And then she opened the drawers until she found the careful display of bosomed shirts she knew were there. She laid one on the bed, his collar and necktie beside it, and took down his best suit from the closet. She gave the collar of the coat a little unnecessary brush with her hand. It seemed almost a wifely touch, and she was angry with herself. Yet it was only that this was mating time, and the tender and the maternal instinct brewing blindly in her was brought forward. A large amount of emotion that was enough to touch other beside her own flooded out, even though she was trying to control herself and hurry as someone was waiting for her. Then she sped downstairs and went away to her own home. Her mother, a little woman, all energy, met her at the gate. She had on her best bonnet and carried her beautiful shawl. She was shading her eyes with her hand and looking tense in a way Isabel scolded her against, for it made wrinkles in her mother's nice forehead. For heaven's sake, where were you? Haven't you seen Jim? No, said Isabel lightly. Where is he? Well, I don't know where he is, said her mother angrily. He came here after you, all dressed up, and I told him you were gone down to Ellen's to carry the cake. So he said he'll go along down and fetch you from there. And I told him he better stop to Ardelia's and see if you were there as well. And then he came back, riding like the wind, and he said that Miss Drake had said that you would be going to the picnic with Oliver. She saw you through the spyglass, and Oliver had gone to get the horse for the carriage. There's father, said Isabel steadily. He's driving out the carriage house now. You got the cake in the buggy? You do worry me almost to death, said Mrs. Wilde, her face had tied itself into a snarl of knots, from which the kindly eyes looked angrily. Who are you going to go with, Isabel? You aren't hooking up with Oliver again, are you? After all said and done? Isabel laughed, but her voice shook a little, but not with joy. I'm all right, Mother. Don't you say anything to anybody. That's all. Here comes Father. Take care of your dress. You'll get the wheel grease on it. Her strong hands were lifting the little creature, and Mrs. Wilde found herself driven away. She was turning a glance over her shoulder to the last and calling, Isabel, you tell me! But Father, who had Isabel's masterful purpose, whipped up, and they were gone. Isabel, still smiling, as if the sun itself could judge her, and it was desirable to keep up some appearance before it, went into the house and closed the door behind her. She took off her hat and hung it on the nails on the front hall. Then her muscles seemed to weaken in a strange way, and she went into the darkened parlor where no neighbor would find her, and sat down by the center table. She bowed her head upon the great picture Bible, and unmindful of the cross and the anchor in perforated paper below, and the green wool mat with its glass beads, began to cry. Isabel hated tears with a fiery disgust. She liked to stand on her 2 feet and face the world as her father did. Yet here she was, sobbing over the center table and drawing quick breaths of misery. Even then, in the passion of her grief, it did occur to her that in all the anger she had felt towards Oliver in times past, she had never wanted to cry. Something now it had hurt a bit deeper in her heart, and she knew it had. She did not know what it exactly was that made her shed the tear. Was it how she gave up on the relationship with Oliver? Or was it the pain of seeing someone else get all the happiness and attention that she had once wanted from Oliver to shower on her? She had got over the first tempest of her grief, and then sat drying her eyes with a wondering shame. And suddenly there was a sound of horse driven rapidly. Hope flooded her face with color. She sprang up and rushed to the window and looked out at the side of the curtain. But it was not Jim. It was Oliver, erect and handsome in his best clothes, and Ardelia beside him. Oliver took a secret glance at the house as they went by, but then he bent to Ardelia again in a way that looked like fondness and protection at once. Ardelia was openly in paradise. She was looking up to him with no eyes for any face at the window, and as they went out of sight, Isabel saw her lift a hand and with an intimate, pretty motion brush something off from his coat. The very same action that she performed while taking out Oliver's coat from the wardrobe. Then they were gone, and immediately the neighborhood seemed to settle into a quiet town. Only it was Isabel who was left behind. For a long time, it seemed to her, she sat there trying to calm her breath and school herself into her old serenity. Then, with her handkerchief, a little wet ball tight in one hand, she rose, went to the mirror that even in the darkened light showed her a miserable look, made a little face at herself, and walked out into the kitchen. There, she stood idly for a moment, debating what she should do. Jim Bright had not lived long in the town, but she knew him very well from the past few weeks of intimacy. He was extremely devoted to her in a way that excited her passionately. There was plenty of fire and passion in him, but he had a temper and he would not come back. Isabel wet her dry lips. I guess, she said to herself, I'll have a bonfire. She thought of baking a pound cake, but all the day before they had made cake for the picnic. She might wash the blankets or begin quilting or clean the system. These dramas were hardly exciting enough. The bonfire was better. She tied on her father's hat and kilted her skirts. Then she brought out the iron rake from the barn and settled the brush heap anew. The litter of garden was there, with the splinter of small wood and dry leaves, and next week her father was meant to burn them all. Isabel lighted her match and stood by watching while the flames curled and crept. Then they crackled among the brush, and she held them down and got excited over it. And for an instant, she forgot about Cooley's wood. It was a good little fight out of doors in the hot sun, with a stream of fire when it caught something dry, and then a column of smoke that made a tang in the air and stirred her body with blood deliciously. Isabel was like a creature of the earth, combating something for the earth's good, and getting hotter and more breathless every minute. What are you doing there? Called a voice from the gate. She forgot the bonfire, remembering her father's hat and her kilted skirts. Jim Bryant threw the gate shut with a clang and came walking slowly across the yard. He was a tall and brown and a sturdy man. Isabel knew exactly how he looked with his brows set and his blue eyes blazing. I've got a bonfire, she said, and raked the harder. Jim came up and took the rake out of her hand. It seemed to be for no purpose save that he had to do something. Isabel put up her head and looked at him. There was hostility in her glance, but it was the challenge of the sex that meets the measure. I see the smoke coming up over there this way, and I thought there was the devil to pay, he said harshly. What are you doing this mess for? I'm not making any mess, she said with her tense lips. This is our land, and I guess I can have a bonfire if I want to. Why are you not at Cooley's woods? The fire was dying down a little, but one persistent flame moved like a snake in the dry stubble, and he savagely stamped it out. Why aren't you? I came after you. You didn't wait, did you? Said Isabel. Old Miss Drake said you were going with Briggs. Did I tell you so? He weakened a little. No, but she said you've been down talking something over with Oliver, and that he had gone to get the horse for the carriage. She offered me the spyglass. Isabel's lips had a little line of white about them. She looked full at him now. Did you take it, Jim? Take it? No, he roared at her. Do you think I would do a thing like that? They stood looking at each other, glance holding glance, their eyes blazing. Suddenly, he threw the rake as if he had been throwing down a shield and held her in her arms. Isabel walked into them, and while they kissed, her father's straw hat slipped back over her shoulders, and she laughed and never missed the fluffy headgear lying in her room upstairs, waiting for Cooley Woods. Suddenly, she remembered that they were out in the broad sunlight, in sight of the road, and then she thought to herself that the whole town had gone to Cooley's Wood. to leave them the world alone to kiss in. She remembered that Mrs. Drake's spyglass might be fixed on them at that very moment. I don't care, she laughed. Don't care for what? Asked her lover, his lips at her ear. For anything. There, let me go. Here's some more fire in the grass. They stamped and raked quite soberly for a moment, and then Isabel began to laugh again. She looked wild and beautiful in her fight with the earth and her own heart. Jim laughed a little too. What is it, Belle? He asked. I don't know, she said, in the ecstasy of happiness. I guess I like bonfire. When it died, still lower, they walked towards the house, hand in hand, and sat there on the steps watching it. Well, said Bryant, smiling at her, you want to go to Pooley's Woods? Isabel smiled back. I guess so, she said. We can be there by lunchtime? All right, I'll go home and bring the carriage up. Halfway down the path, he stopped and turned. Say, Isabel. She answered from the porch on her way in to wear the beautiful muslin dress. What is it? You never told me what you were doing down there. Where? Down to Oliver's? She shook her head and laughed. No, nor will I tell you about it either. His brows were coming together. It was an errand, she called to him. It wasn't mine either. That is all that you get to know. Again, they stood looking at each other, this time with a steady challenge, as if more things were decided that moment's victory. Then suddenly, as if in the same breath, they smiled again. And Jim gave her a little nod. Get your things on, he called. We're going to Pooley's Wood, that's all I want to know. That was the end of our story. Thank you so much for listening to it. I hope you all enjoyed it. I will be back again with another wonderful story. Till then, do subscribe to my channel and thank you so much for tuning in.